Hi, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have really inspiring conversations with artists living in and from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Yarkic. Welcome back to the podcast. It's lovely that you could join me. Thank you. This is episode 157, and I'm speaking with Delainy Jamahl. Delainy is a visual artist and creative technologist. Working at the intersection of art and technology, Delainy Jamahl's art practice focuses on data as the central narrative. He creates immersive and interactive installations that explore and visualise, transforming complex information into engaging visual experiences. It was lovely to meet Delainy and to speak with a creative technology artist, the first of his kind on the podcast. In this episode, we explore the creative and technical routes he took and the great influence an artist mentor had on him that led him to consider channeling his skills into an art practice. We discuss in detail two of Delainy's stunning works, Sight Unseen, which is a unique photographic data set of infrared and colour infrared images of Wellington, continuing his exploration of visualising the invisible and revealing the beauty of the unseen. Rivers of Wind, another work of his, is a mesmerising immersive digital artwork which uses 8 years of historic weather data from the Wellington Airport weather station to produce its flowing visuals. We get into the technical side of immersive video and sound work, which, although new to me, I actually found really interesting. Delainy shares the feelings he is trying to express and create with the work, how people react to it, the ways he communicates the ideas behind his work, and he goes into his creative process. We talk about a collaboration nowadays with New Zealand artist Tim Christie, who's also been on the podcast, and other plans he has for collaborative projects and spaces. Delainy is the owner and director at Artificial Imagination and the co-founder of The Grid, which produces captivating digital art experiences, collaborating with artists to challenge the boundaries of imagination. Kia ora, Delainy.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming onto the podcast and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, really good to be here.
It's nice to be chatting. You're down in Wellington, so unfortunately we're Zooming again. Hopefully one day I'll meet you in person. Wellington at the moment, you were born in Nelson. What do you love about living in Wellington?
Quite a few things. I think the lifestyle is the number one. I did live in Auckland for about 7 or 8 years, and that was great, but lots of moving around, as you'll know, lots of driving. And then I also lived in Germany and Berlin for 2 years, and I really loved the ease in which I could kind of move around that city. And even though it was such a big city, so when my partner and I were moving back from Germany, we were kind of like, where is the best place we might kind of be able to have this similar lifestyle to the one that we had in Berlin? And Wellington was the place that we chose. And for me, it's a 7-minute bike ride from my house to my studio. Doesn't really get much better than that.
No, that's fantastic. And Wellington is such a sort of creative hub, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Despite what stuff has been saying for the last kind of 6 months, it still has a lot of life.
So let's go back to the beginning, Delainy. First of all, love your name, Delainy Jamahl, which is, I have done a bit of research and found out that is a name that you've taken on as your artist name, and Jamahl is your middle name. So I'm very proud of myself for figuring that out.
Yeah, you were actually the first person to guess that. Even people who have known me for years were like, where did Jamahl come from? And I was like, oh, it's my middle name. They're like, oh, really? Yeah. So yeah, good guess. Yeah. So Delainy is typically historically it's been an Irish surname, spelt a little bit differently than my name. My name has an I in it, and typically there's no I, but there's an E before the Y at the end. And actually, funny story, I did have a friend in primary school whose surname was Delainy, and we were actually very good friends with his kind of whole family. So we always joked about like Delainy, two names.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so
And then
good.
and then Jamal was a name that was kind of gifted from a family friend, close friends of my parents at the time that I was born, and they really were very close with Jamal. So it became my middle name.
Great. It's brilliant. Such a cool name. As I said, you were born in Nelson.
Grew up in sunny Nelson, as it's as it's well known for. I didn't leave there until I was about 18, so I spent the first kind of big growth period of my life really growing up there. And my parents worked a lot in the art scene. My dad was a hairdresser and a DJ, and mum was a dance teacher. And my stepdad was the technical director of the Nelson Arts Festival for many years. And so between the kind of the three of them, I used to spend a lot of time at festivals and arts festivals and music festivals included, and theater shows and like all these kinds of different places. So um, you could kind of say that I was kind of steered towards being in the kind of live arts and entertainment industry from a young age. Um, but also my other siblings, none of them have gone in that direction. So I was kind of more or less the only one who took it up. But even from age about 9, Anthony, my stepdad, he was running this summer movies al fresco, and which he's still doing. And we used to do outdoor movies in the summer around the Nelson and Tasman region. And I was about 9 or 10, and I'd be there helping them set up the screen, lifting things off the top of the van. They used to get me to stand on the roof of the van and pass down scaffold bars. And it's very funny. We kind of sometimes talk about, they're like, man, we would not do that with a 9-year-old these days, but for some reason it was okay with you. It
Yeah.
was this funny thing. But I
Yeah.
used to like take time off school as well, from about even age like 11 or 12, take a few weeks off during the arts festival period and work on those kind of things with them.
Mm,
And mum was teaching kind of performing arts class that I was attending as well with a few other friends. And actually, my now partner was also in that performing arts class.
really.
So yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's amazing. What a fantastic way to grow up.
yeah, very kind of arts culture driven. Which yeah, at the time, sometimes I'd rebel against these things. Just be like, oh, why do we have to be like that? Why can't we just be like normal family? We're always doing kind of something weird. But like if I look back on that, I'm like, oh no, it was such a rich childhood that we had with all those
Yeah.
experiences.
Oh, totally. Amazing. And at high school, I mean, high school art is very different to, you being involved in your parents' creative lives. Did you actually study art at school?
I actually didn't study art at school. No. I did a bit of drama at school, and I thought I was going to be a performer for a little while there, but then I kind of found the love of being behind the stage and behind the camera, and really delve more into that kind of the technical side of doing events
Mm,
and experiences and stuff. Um, I left school at a very young age. I mean, like just as I was turned 16, so I was only like very early sixth form. School really wasn't working for me. It just wasn't the kind of the right format for the way that I like to learn.
yeah.
And so I left and was just working as and when I could. All three of my parents were always um, self-made, I guess you could say. They were contractors. They were, dad had his own business, and so for me, I guess I was always going to felt like I was going to go down that road as well, and kind of,
Mm,
you know, be in charge of my own destiny, so to speak.
yeah. Which is a
um,
good thing. That's a great thing about creating your own business is that, you can choose what you're most passionate about and then try and make it happen.
Absolutely, yeah. Um, so yeah, I was just kind of when I left school, I was just kind of doing whatever, painting houses and bits and pieces, and doing a bit works on the arts festival, and kind of picking up events and work where I could until I was about 18, 19, and then I shifted to Wellington actually, and managed to get a job at a company called Spyglass. They were doing the technical side of events, mostly in the AV kind of realm, and that's where I kind of grew my love of projection and that sort of thing, and then continued from there.
That's so good. And at that point, were you thinking, hey, maybe I should do a degree and have that sort of piece of paper, or was that really not a consideration? I guess because you were already in that world, it may not have felt so important.
Yeah, I did. I definitely something I did strongly consider. I moved to Wellington actually with my now partner, but who was just my best friend kind of at the time, Shannon. She went to Toi Whakaare, which is like the performing and arts drama school here, and they also had a production and kind of design paper and that sort of thing. So I did kind of consider maybe doing something like that, but I guess I was just more allured by being able to just jump in and do the thing instead of kind of studying and going for it. So that's kind of the path I ultimately took. But I have reflected on that many times over the last kind of decade or so, and flirted with the idea of maybe doing something or studying something new at university or something like that. But then I started a business, and no time for that.
No, that plan went out the window. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, understandably. Yeah. And it is something I think as you get older that you think you might like to do potentially. You know, some people I've spoken to on the podcast have kind of returned finally.
Yeah.
But I think it just depends on your path, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. I've been doing a little bit with Massey University, and they're talking to some of their teachers there, and they're like, "Oh, you could always come back and do a master's, or something along those lines." Um, but again, there's always lots of things happening, and I just really like to get stuck in and do things on my own accord, really, and
Yeah.
learn things on my own time. And I guess that's kind of what's driven me more than the need for any sort of qualification or doing it for any kind of particular reason. I've kind of personally quite motivated just for doing it for, I guess,
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. And that formal learning in an institution, probably wouldn't be your thing anyway.
Yeah, well, exactly. I kind of realized at a young age that it wasn't really going to work for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good. It's a great way to learn, just being out in the world, in my opinion.
yeah.
So, can you take us from there, Delaney, and talk about, how you kind of got into your art practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as I said, I'd got, maybe at 19, I'd got a job at Spyglass, and I was doing technical, setting up projectors, setting up screens, operating shows, all sorts of kind of different things, really from that kind of technical side. And as I kind of grew my technical skill set, I was working with a lot of creatives more and more, like technical equipment is really there to kind of serve creative purposes in that kind of video realm. And so I realized that it didn't matter how big a scale we went to. Um, the content and the creative behind it was really the driving force, and that's what made it either beautiful or amazing or not. It was really, that was kind of what was driving it. So I got inspired in my own time to just make little animations. I was doing VJing, so I was like just doing visuals for kind of electronic music at dance parties and that sort of thing. That was kind of like my early foray, I guess, into video art and that kind of thing. And I continued kind of like this for probably about 3 or 4 years, and then eventually I left Spyglass and was just kind of freelancing. And then I worked for a company called Darkroom. They're a motion graphics company, and they do a lot of kind of what I do now as well, just making motion graphics and visuals for concerts and conferences, and doing building projections and that sort of thing. And yeah, I started there as a junior, not earning much money at all, but doing something that I was wanted to kind of move into, kind of out of that technical realm. And because it was still really revolving around these events and creating kind of video art kind of for events, that fundamental kind of technical background that I had is kind of really helped me through that. And being able to take a video or an animation or a blank canvas and kind of take it all the way through from concept to being projected onto the building, and like knowing that whole process really kind of gave me quite a good leverage to be able to kind of create content and create it in the right way that I knew how it was going to look as it kind of came out the other end.
Yeah.
And that fundamental skill set that I've kind of built through that technical pipeline all the way through, or creative pipeline all the way through to the technical pipeline, has really been kind of instrumental in like everything that I've done since then. And so you kind of like, after I worked at Darkroom for maybe about a year, and then we actually started my previous company, a company called Nocturnal, and when I was living in Auckland, and we were really focused on doing kind of light art festivals, which at the time was just kind of starting to pop off. And then, then all of a sudden every town had a light festival. So like we were kind of jumping around from like Auckland to Nelson to Queenstown to Taupo to like all these different places, touring like either video art or kind of light sculpture that would be like somehow interactive. All sorts of kind of like crazy contraptions that we built for those kind of art in the dark, in a park.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things, rain or shine. Really just kind of fusing those kind of creative skill sets with the technical skill set, and also kind of scratching the kind of, I guess, in some ways, like not engineering, but the urge to like build something, either through 3D printing or kind of subtractive manufacturing, working with a little bit with a guy named Angus Muir in Auckland as well. He had a good kind of manufacturing facility for like building stuff. So we'd kind of have these crazy ideas and then go to him and like be able to build them in his workshop and have his support, which is really awesome.
Was that part of the light works that you were doing? It was sort of like a sculptural element?
Yeah, sculptural element. Yeah. So we kind of maybe build a sculptural element and then projection map it in the park.
Right.
Or build a light sculpture and then run animations through all the lights and that sort of thing. And around probably 2016, I had quite a big pivotal moment where I worked for an artist named Joseph Michael, and he did a projection on the Auckland War Memorial Museum in the Domain, and that was our first kind of major projection work as Nocturnal as a company. And also for me, I kind of really led the process in terms of taking the imagery and getting it from photographic imagery through into projection onto the building. And he was really inspiring for me because he was a digital artist who had gone from, I have an idea that's huge and I want to kind of make this happen, and I want to get all the funding for it, and I want to do all this thing. And for me, that was really pivotal in terms of changing my perspective on what I'd been doing, because I'd more or less been making content kind of commercially as just doing motion graphics and this sort of thing. I hadn't really even considered that at one point I might have my own arts practice. And so Joseph, like, he took a team of people, sailed the Drake Passage and then sailed around Antarctica for 1 month, photographing beautiful icebergs at scale. And then when he brought it back to Auckland, we pieced all those photographs together and the video together and turned it into a 40-minute installation of icebergs, taking it from, like, his concept was to have a 1-to-1 scale iceberg in the city. And that's what it had to be on a building. As we mapped that building with 20 projectors all the way around the outside. And we were there, from as soon as it got dark until it got light the next morning, doing all the mapping and getting it ready. And it was just such a phenomenal project that I found it so inspiring. So we mapped that, the museum, all 360 all the way around. And it was just incredible. And Rian Sheehan, actually, who I've now since collaborated with, he did the soundtrack, and it's just so beautiful. And I just fell in love with his work around that time. And then you can fast forward kind of 3 years from there, and we actually took that same project to New York. and we projection mapped the United Nations headquarters.
Wow.
And so we had this crazy surreal moment where we had a projection that was 180 meters high in the middle of New York, and we were sitting inside the garden they have there at midnight, and you could kind of hear the crazy sounds of the city that never sleeps echoing down the streets, and we were in this kind of relative place of peace, having some dinner, at like 11:30 p.m. projection mapping this building, and we were just going, "How is this our life?"
Yeah. Wow, that must have been such a pinch me moment.
It really was, and
Yeah.
so those kind of two projects really kind of started to fuel me in terms of thinking that maybe I could have my own arts practice.
Mm.
And 2019 was actually the year that we'd moved to Germany. So kind of on our way to Germany, we went through New York, did this project, and then landed in Berlin. And we're like, wow, what do we do
Yeah.
now?
Why did you choose to go to Germany?
Well, my partner and I, we always knew we wanted to spend some time overseas. And we had, in 2017, we had done a 3-month tour of kind of Europe. And we debated with whether or not we would go, like where we would go. There was lots of kind of options out there. But we're both kind of creative people at heart, and we really felt like Berlin was the place that could kind of feed us the most. We also wanted the challenge of, you learning a new language and existing in a culture that was kind of fundamentally different to ours. I'd done quite a lot of travel over the years for different projects, kind of from India to Iceland to Europe to like all these places, and all for work as well. So I had a pretty good grasp on like the kinds of places that I might enjoy, and I might want to exist and live in for a period of time. That being said, I'd only ever actually spent about 3 days in Berlin prior to us deciding that we wanted to move there. And we did have family in London as well, and so that was one consideration. But yeah, we went back to that thing of like, oh, we really want the challenge of being in a culture that is just so different. I mean, really, Germany isn't so different if compared to maybe something like Southeast Asia or something. But we also wanted to be in Europe because there's just so much access. Once you're in Europe, there's so much going on, and you don't have to travel
Yeah.
far to be in a different country. So
Mm. And were you hoping to kind of continue your career there?
yeah, so I managed to get a job there working for a company, but it was more on the technical side again. So I kind of fell back onto that technical skill set, which allowed me to just I got a 4-year visa there, and it was very easy. And because they were like mostly an international company, everyone spoke English, so that was like also made it a little bit easy.
Yeah, that
But
would
it means
help.
I got to travel around a lot as well, and I
Mm.
spent a bit of time working in the US and a little bit of time in India and China. So that was kind of the
Wow.
attraction to be able to just work in a field that I knew really well and that I could excel in,
Yeah.
and also the
That's,
opportunity to travel around and meet lots of new people and stuff.
mm. Well, it just sounds like the most perfect thing. And in a way, I guess your career all the way through you've had that technical side which you can kind of fall back on, which is kind of good. And then, obviously you started to develop the more artistic or, your own personal art practice as time went on. So how did you get back to your art practice as such?
Yeah, so it was around the time when we were in Germany, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden there was no work, especially in the events kind of sector, and I found myself with a lot more time on my hands,
Mm.
and I'd kind of seen quite a few things, particularly over that last 6 months from New York and traveling around Berlin, um, and kind of Europe in general, around kind of different art practices, and particularly in the kind of the digital realm. And what I'd been missing for a long time for me in terms of doing art was my narrative. I hadn't quite figured out what that was, and like what I was kind of trying to say, or potentially also like in some ways like who I was in that kind of artistic form. And I really found that in data. That's kind of where Rivers of Wind was born out of. Was okay, well, here's something that is everywhere, all around us, and here's something that I can really leverage and to give the work that I do some really strong substance.
Mm.
And so, during that time, I think it was around 2020, I was kind of like, okay, what sort of data is available and what is out there? And, climate and weather data is some of the most collected data all around the world. And so I was like, perfect. I'm going to start here. And I picked Wellington because at that point we had already kind of discussed that if we were to move back to New Zealand, then they would potentially go back to Wellington. And it's also, of course, very known, and kind of almost defined by its windy characteristics. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I chose
Mm.
the weather data from the Wellington airport, and I did a few months of kind of development and process during that time, when there wasn't much else going on, and yeah, it really gave me actually kind of sometimes fondly think about those lockdown eras because it just gave me so much time to work on my art.
Yeah, actually for you, it was probably perfect timing because it gave you time.
Yeah, it gave me
Yeah.
time in a new city. Um, have fond memories of sitting in my apartment in Berlin, looking outside and working on my art, and until the wee hours, until the
Yeah.
sun came up. I really my natural habit is to become a creature of the night, and if I let it slide, then it gets later and later, and eventually I'm like working night shift. I really have to
Really.
work quite hard to keep my schedule aligned with kind of the rest of society.
Is that right? Well, it's quite
Yeah.
handy that you're doing the kind of job that you're doing, I guess,
Well,
being a
yeah, I
night
think
owl. Yeah,
that's partly fueled, no doubt,
that's where
fueled by
it's
that.
come from.
Doing
Yeah.
outdoor projections and that sort of thing. Naturally, you have to
Mm.
wait for the light to disappear. So I tend to get a big burst of energy around just as it gets dark, kind of every day, and I'm like, cool, now I'm ready to do stuff. What's happening?
That's amazing. I love that. And so you were still in Germany while you were looking at the data from Wellington.
Yeah, I was,
Yeah,
and I really
which is
developed
kind of
the first
nice
part
in
of
a
that.
way.
Yeah,
It must have been nice to sort of reconnect with your country, especially in those crazy times. And then
yeah.
how did you actually manage to get back?
Yeah, I mean, it was just on that point of reconnecting. It was and it wasn't. Like, it was really interesting because Germany was locked down at that point, but New Zealand was this kind of safe haven of, you know, everyone was still out and about. I had friends messaging me from festivals and that sort of thing. So there was a bit of a little bit of like, oh, I wish I was at home right now, but at the same time, yeah, well, I guess that was kind of bittersweet in some ways.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, after a couple of years of COVID, we really decided that it was kind of too much, and home became quite far away. It became about 2 weeks if you were lucky to get a spot in MIQ, and that just started to get a bit far. So we decided to kind of come home in late 2021, and once we got back, then the New Zealand lockdown started, which was a bit unfortunate in terms of timing. But
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, that would have been. But more
but yeah,
time to focus on your art
yeah,
project.
exactly. And throughout that whole time, I'd kind of kept developing it, and I had big plans to, my original vision was almost what we managed to achieve last year at the grid, but 360 projection around you and projection on the floor as well, just really full immersion into the video. Um, my first iteration, my first kind of presentation of it um, wasn't that, but we just did one floor and one wall, so it was kind of like an L shape, and that was for our concept showing that we did at Te Awaha, prior to me doing an exhibition at the Te Awaha Gallery, which was
Mm.
just one kind of screen. But that gave both me and us as the grid an opportunity to have people in the space and get feedback from our community and kind of see if there was an appetite in New Zealand for this kind of digital immersive digital art, because we've seen a lot of it in Germany and in New York, and we really kind of got inspired while we were over there say like,
Mm.
hey, we could bring this home. This could be our future. And that
Yeah,
was
and it
really
is.
exciting for us.
It would have been so exciting and such a fantastic thing to bring to New Zealand because I think it is starting to happen more, but it's still relatively new, isn't it? That kind of art form in New Zealand.
Yeah, I think so. The problem is it's just such a expensive barrier between doing it and not doing it. It's
Yeah.
for all of the technical equipment required. Um, it's yeah, just you're spending hundreds of thousands to be able to rent that and for any extended period of time. And there's no spaces that really kind of are catered for building that sort of production or that sort of experience. So that's kind of that's our mission at the Grid, is to be able to basically establish a space like that in New Zealand that we can really foster this sort of art form.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. We'll talk about that in a second. So, just going back to the Rivers of Wind, that installation you're talking about using data
Mm.
from Wellington Airport. I mean, for me, I really know nothing about this kind of thing. So, when you say data, you're talking about wind speeds and that kind of thing that's come from the weather station, basically at the airport, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's driven by a spreadsheet essentially of data. It's got temperature, gusts, direction, speed. All sorts of atmospheric pressure. All sorts of kind of stuff like that. And I basically have one row of data per day. And then I have for Rivers of Wind, I had 8 years of data.
Wow.
Um, and then the way that it works is that every second I step through a new layer of data. And those data points drive different aspects of the simulation. It's a simulation of sorts. All of the movement that you see is all kind of simulated with the factors of the simulation being changed by the data in the spreadsheet.
Mm. So,
Yeah.
like, if a certain number, for example, would correlate with a certain line or a certain height of a line or something like that, can you explain
So
how the
yeah.
data sort of
So
is converted
the
visually?
most kind of direct and obvious one is the temperature affects the color. So the warmer it gets, the more orange it gets. The cooler it gets, the more blue it gets. Um, and then the direction kind of moves the whole simulation in kind of any direction, and then the gust and the wind speed will push it in whatever direction that is.
Mm.
And then it gets a little bit more complex in terms of how the noise is affected, in terms of how it breaks up into these kind of beautiful patterns. That's like a combination of atmospheric pressure and wind speed and temperature, and all these things kind of come together. I tried to mimic as best as was kind of possible how the weather systems work in reality, um, but that isn't but it's not like an accurate simulation. It's an artistic simulation, so it was never
Mm.
meant to be like perfectly represent what happened. It was just
Right.
meant to be an artistic expression of what was happening on that day or those given days.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. So once again, I'm very ignorant on this kind of production, but how did you actually create it? Like, what sort of machinery or what sort of devices or apps or programs were you
Mm,
using?
yeah. Well, it starts in Google Sheets, sorting through all the data and arranging it in such a way that kind of it works for what I was using. And there was a little bit like some data points were not recorded for a month at some randomly, so there is some level of like some of that data I just kind of averaged out from previous recordings, or tried to kind of had to kind of fill that in. So there's a little bit of just like managing that data to start with, and then from there I was using a software called Notch, which is like a node based creation tool. And nodes are just they're like little squares that you can kind of plug in together, and they're like small blocks of code that you can kind of put together to kind of make what you want to make, um, which is a great tool for an artist like me who doesn't want to learn any code, but I can still have kind of a similar functionality to the modularity that kind of writing code offers as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I mostly generated all of Rivers of Wind was made inside this software notch. And what's really powerful about it is it's all in real time. So I'm seeing changes being made, as soon as I make them. And so I get a really kind of fast response to the decisions that I'm making as an artist and what that effect is. And that's just such a powerful tool for iteration. And, particularly when you're trying to iterate on the movement and the feeling of something, that's kind of undefinable. You just have to work at it until it gets to the feeling that you're going for. That's very hard
Yeah.
to do that if you have to like make a change, like in traditional 3D software, for example. Um, Often you have to make a change and then maybe wait for a period of time for the computer to compute what's going on and then see that change reflected. And yeah, that can make the iteration process quite hard.
Mm.
And for me, doing art and it's a hybrid of art and design, really. And so there's a lot of iteration that kind of goes on to get to the final product.
That's so interesting. And when you say feeling, what was the feeling that you were wanting or you were seeking?
Yeah, I think the feeling, I mean, there's a few in there, but definitely like serenity and it's not exactly a feeling, but something that's ephemeral and just the constant changing and moving nature. Really, I was trying to give some sort of like visualization to that invisible force, that the wind is, and also trying to change people's kind of perspective on that because a lot of people I know who come to Wellington don't necessarily have a positive relationship with that wind. For me, I really come to miss it when I'm not around. Um, so kind of wanted to be able to maybe change their perspective and show them the beauty in that as well.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And it is such a beautiful work. It's incredible. I'd love to see it. And it's so immersive and interactive.
Hmm.
How did you find people actually reacted to it?
Yeah, the response was amazing, especially when we got to the scale of doing it at the grid, where it was really kind of I could finally show it and the close to the form that I'd originally kind of envisioned it for. Um, Having people's reaction as they would kind of walk out, everyone was really engaged in terms of the data. They really want to know how that was working, what was driving it. There was so many conversations around that kind of stuff, and also just lots of people calling it mesmerizing and relaxing and serene and all those kind of
Mm.
aspects to it. So I guess you could say I got the response that I was looking for, but I also wasn't certain on that what I was looking for prior to exhibiting it either.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
This is just a short break. Welcome back to the Creative Notice Board. This week, I'd like to let you know that I'm going to be recording episodes slightly less often, so we're not doing the release each week, just because I've got a lot on my plate at the moment. So expect to hear about new episodes through my Instagram page, Creative Matters Podcast. I will be releasing probably every 3 or 4 weeks, so I'll keep you in the loop with that. Anna Gibbs' South Island Songs is on show at Little River Gallery, which is in Banks Peninsula, until February the 24th, and this show starts on the 30th of January. It's a collection of 11 very striking 24-carat gold leaf and oil works depicting native New Zealand bird life. Anna's works not only highlight the unique elegance of each species, but also evoke in the viewer a sense of their value and the pressing need to protect these birds. It's a really breathtaking exhibition, not to be missed. You can hear more about Anna Gibbs and her amazing story in episode 156. Now back to Delainy.
Sometimes as well, like the soundtrack that was so crucial to the feeling that it had as well. The two together were really kind of what made it. And Rian Sheehan's work, who composed the sound for me, he just did such an amazing job. And sometimes I would go into that space and people were just lying on the floor with their eyes closed. And the beauty of that whole work was that you could do that and you could wake up and you could open your eyes and it wouldn't take you away from that feeling you had when you closed your eyes. You could see them in isolation, but you could also just see one at a time, and it would kind of give you the same feeling. And so that was,
Mm.
yeah, it was a really beautiful synchronicity that we managed there.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. And the composer actually connecting, the movement and the spaces and that kind of thing of your work with the music? Was it really sort of tied in quite literally, or was it more just a feeling?
He wasn't using the data as such to drive it, but I would give him the completed video, and then from there, he would go through and basically his response to the completed work, um, which means like all of the big gust moments, Ren would add big sounds to all of those moments. So there was really like he went through, I would say, probably more of a manual process than I went through in terms of creating the video artwork. But because of that, it feels very natural, and the response and the timing of all the response of the sound and the video just go so well together because Ren really spent that time to kind of make sure that that's what would happen.
Mm,
Ren does, he composes music for film and TV and planetariums and all of that sort of thing. So he's really used to creating big, spatial soundscapes and stuff.
mm. And for you as the artist, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Sort of collaborating with somebody else or getting somebody else in, especially once you've already created the work. Were you looking for someone who was going to make a sound, this kind of sound that you already sort of had in your head, or did you just leave it to him to kind of react personally to your work? How did that actually come about?
Yeah, I had a few references of the sort of thing that I would like, and then after that, I kind of just let him do his thing. Like I fully trusted Ryan to make something that would, perfectly fit the work,
Mm,
and I kind of had him in mind really early on in my process. Sometimes I would, develop the work while listening to his music, for example. So um, I kind of, yeah, I really just trusted Ryan to because I had worked with him previously and that I had loved his music. So I knew that he would do, a great job.
that's so fantastic. How amazing. And for you to finally look at your work with that soundtrack or the soundscape must have been very powerful.
Yeah, it was, yeah, sitting in the space and having it all there happening at once. I think I just sat there for, half an hour, just taking it in, particularly when we had it at the grid, because it was such a big feat for us to kind of get to that point as well. That it was the kind of first moment of serenity and the kind of chaos of the months leading up to that.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so you've mentioned the grid a few times. So that was a space that you founded or co-founded, wasn't it? And basically you needed to find a space that you could manage to show your work. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, co-founded the grid with my partner Shannon, and which we incepted the idea during the time we were living in Berlin, actually. Kind of around what I was talking about earlier, just there not really being any spaces in New Zealand that are kind of that really cater towards this sort of immersive projection um, experience. And so that's kind of what we set out to do. And last year we finally managed to do that. And we did it all off our own back. So we had no funding, it was completely 100% funded by us. So it was a big kind of undertaking to do. And but yeah, really we're looking for what kind of being able to create the space and to be able to test our idea. Like, is there an appetite for this in New Zealand? Can we have this kind of commercially sustainable and not have to rely on arts funding to kind of keep our doors open and that sort of thing? And really, we just wanted to be able to craft the experience that we wanted to craft and without any kind of external factors getting in the way of that. So,
Yeah, how incredible. And it's so great that you managed to do that. And so were you thinking this is just for your work to show that particular piece of work, or were you wondering if you could get other people showing their work in that space?
Yeah, no, not at all. We were definitely, our intention was always to kind of collaborate and produce works for other people. So early on, we actually reached out to Tim Christie, so another local Wellington artist, to do who you've had on the podcast before, because we knew we wanted to collaborate with someone. And I'd seen Tim's work actually while I was doing light festivals down in Queenstown. There's a gallery there, the Lightworks Gallery, and it had some of his stuff. And I'd always really loved his kind of bold graphical style,
Mm,
and often thought that it would make an amazing immersive experience. And we've kind of been looking at a few different people who could, who we could potentially collaborate with. But we also wanted to collaborate with someone locally in Wellington that we could kind of connect with and not have to do everything kind of over the internet, and actually have face to face, and just allow for, all those conversations just to spend a lot more time kind of together, I guess, and really allow that to kind of foster. So um, I just cold emailed Tim out of the blue one day. I said to Shannon, my partner, I was like, look, I'm just going to email him. Like, what have we got to lose? She's like, yeah, go for it. So I just cold emailed him, and he, funnily enough, had been thinking that he wanted to do a very similar thing. He was been thinking about, okay, how can I, get my art into a new medium? And so it was quite serendipitous, actually.
oh, that's
Um,
fantastic. And I can imagine
yeah,
Tim being the sort of person he is, that he would have been really up for it and into it.
he was so up for it. Yeah, and yeah, he was a great collaborator, actually.
Mm,
I knew kind of after our first conversation, we met up once more then, and we talked for about 2 hours. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a great relationship. Like,
yeah.
let's go for it. I knew kind of straight away. I really felt like we were going to get along and we were going to collaborate well together.
Mm,
And because it was quite an intense period of time as well. It was a big project to kind of undertake, and a lot of work for both of us. So we both had to be confident in the other that they were going to, put the work in to be able to, give a really good result. So
yeah. And so how that work was called
nowadays,
nowadays. Nowadays.
nowadays, yeah,
Nowadays. Yeah. So
yeah,
is it a play on the idea of nowadays and also the sort of deity kind of idea?
exactly, yeah, yeah. And Tim came up with the name. Yeah, one day he just kind of messaged us in the group chat, being like, "What about nowadays?" And yeah, we kind of sat on that for a little bit, and then we all felt like, yeah, it's perfect.
And when you say collaborating out of the grid, it was his work. What were you doing? What was your part of the collaboration?
Yeah, so the way it kind of functioned was that Tim, because he works in the static art realm, right? He's making prints for sale and that sort of thing. Um, so he would create digitally the base artworks, and so he created a series of artworks for nowadays, and then we took those base artworks and did all of the animation work, and so that was kind of where it split. So
Mm,
pretty significant undertaking for us to be able to kind of take those static works and turn them into what we ultimately kind of turn them into, because essentially we had to recreate his works um, using different tools than the tools that he was using. He's using tools like Photoshop and Illustrator, whereas for us we're using all kind of animation tools. So we more or less had to like recreate everything,
mm,
and with different techniques depending on the style, whether or not it was made out of dots, whether or not it was made out of lines, these sorts of things. Each kind of style used a different technique, and yeah, and then we could kind of animate it and from there. So
that's
yeah,
amazing. And that must have been lovely for Tim to see his work sort of taken in a different direction slightly.
yeah, he was blown away actually. He said to me that kind of after we did that first preview, that it went beyond anything that he thought that we would have created. So that was pretty
Mm,
special to be
yeah,
able
it's
to
great.
exceed his expectations, because he he's worked in a high level design for a long time, and now is a full time artist and has had good success. So I think he had high expectations. So to be
Mm.
able to exceed that was, yeah, was really awesome.
That's great. And good on you for taking the plunge and making something like that space happen. Does it still exist, the grid?
So yeah, last year was a temporary space, but we have lots of plans as to how we might be able to bring it back, and then ultimately working towards our goal of making it a permanent space here in Wellington. Um, we've got a few different presentations that we're doing this year, and we're just trying to grow our network and hopefully meet with some funders and these sorts of things, and just help us get to the point where we can purchase all the equipment that we need to be able to do it full time.
Mm. And can you see it as a sort of public art gallery space almost, as well as a sort of production venue and a place for you to put on, what you want to put on, including your own work, and then sort of have opportunities to collaborate with other artists? Do you see it as all of those things?
Yeah, definitely all of those things. I think for the first part, it'll really be focused on works that we're creating and works that we're kind of creating that collaboration with. That's for us to, I guess, be the most sure that we can kind of have something in there that's going to captivate and bring people in. And then as we kind of build our audience through that process, we'll be able to start branching it out more and more to projects that we potentially haven't been involved with the creation of at all. And invite more people in. Definitely what we found is that we needed a second space at the grid. We only really had two spaces, but one kind of major exhibition space and one little kind of supporting. We would love another space on top of that to be able to just allow kind of younger or establishing artists, or even people like myself. I would still consider myself very much an establishing artist. To the ability to kind of experiment and show things prior to them being like a fully polished finished product, and just help us test ideas to our audience as well, and to see what kind of really grasps people, and have a bit more opportunity for interaction and that sort of thing too.
It sounds very exciting, and it is quite sort of forward thinking. It is quite innovative and sort of slightly new and fresh,
Yeah.
which is good. And I guess, once you've got that space and you've built up your name and your reputation, which you're obviously already doing, then you can imagine that it could become, your work could become something that the public see out in the open. And then, I can imagine places like Te Papa getting you in to create, something amazing for a special event, or, it just feels like there's so much potential that you're kind of tapping into.
Yeah, I mean that would be the dream.
Yeah.
You've aptly described what we're absolutely aiming to
Yeah.
achieve. So yeah.
And I think you will. I think you will. Let's just talk quickly about Sight Unseen, which is another project of
Yeah,
yours. And you've shown that a few times. That is a little bit different in a way, isn't it? It's
very
based
different.
on
Yeah,
your photography to start with.
based on photos. Yeah, so it still kind of revolves around the concept of data, except this time instead of the data being numerical, it was photographic, and it's also really looking at the rise of AI and how that's kind of changing the creative process, but also how some companies have definitely just been scraping the internet and basically more or less stealing artwork from artists, or globally, and using their art to train new AI without kind of the permission of the owners. So I went out to capture my own data set so I could be absolutely sure that I owned all the rights to all the things, to everything that was kind of involved in the process, and also to look at how that process is if you are a single artist trying to achieve what these huge tech companies are going to achieve. And, the work is monumental, to be fair. I was aiming for a data set of 5,000 images. I only got to 2,500 before I was like, I need to do the next part of this process, because I'd already booked my exhibition date and it was coming up very quickly. So, yeah, it's an interesting process.
Yeah, well, that's a
But
lot. 2,500 is a lot of photos.
and curated as well. I wasn't, I probably shot 4,000, but I probably culled quite a
Mm,
lot of them that just weren't what I was looking for.
mm,
And um, and I really wanted, because I'm training, like the process was to capture a data set of images, train machine learning, train an AI on all of those images, and then exhibit the both the photos and the generated imagery from the AI from that original data set. And so the data set I called was Wellington Unseen, and it's called Unseen because all of the photos are in the infrared space. So it's in the non-visible light spectrum, or a combination of visible and non-visible light. So some infrared and some visible light kind of together. And so that was kind of like, I was both trying to further my kind of photographic exploration and also simultaneously kind of produce video artwork that I could use to, exhibit.
mm. And so how was the AI contributing to that process?
Yeah, so it was all of the photos that I took. I was basically feeding that into the AI, and then it would train itself on all of those imagery to then generate new images that look similar to the original data set, but would hopefully be different enough, and which it certainly was. The particular machine learning that I used was some of the earlier stuff, some stuff that was kind of released maybe 2019, 2020. And that technology has come a long way since then. So it has this kind of grunge or this kind of surreal look to it that's like uncanny is maybe a better term.
Mm,
Where it looks kind of like what you like Wellington in particular, because that was where I shot my data set. But it also, there's some things that are not quite right.
yeah.
And I kind of love that about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So it's basically urban environments and a lot of buildings and that kind of thing, isn't it? It's
Yes.
very
Yeah,
it feels very sort of hard and concretey and that
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
kind of feel. But also has a little bit of a slightly vintage feel to me. Just some of the images, maybe just
Yeah.
the colouring, or it's just kind of that old grunge sort of feel as well.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I guess that's part of the infrared thing that sometimes it's all very white and, you know, really
Yeah.
interesting visually.
Yeah.
So you actually ended up with sort of moving images, like it was, sorry, again, pardon my ignorance, but
No, not
photos
at
sort
all.
of turning into other photos and that's
Yeah.
kind of, so how is that just part of the way you combine the elements?
No, so that was actually originally what kind of drew me to using machine learning, because when it generates an image, it generates the image in what is called latent space, which is like an abstract mathematical space that only the computer could possibly understand. But what it means is that every image has a series of numerical values that kind of create the image. And then so when you create two images, you can transition between the two. It's called latent walking. And you can basically morph between those two images just by changing those numerical values. And so then when you string a whole lot of them together, you get those crazy animations that you
Mm.
see there.
Amazing. And it's different to your rivers of wind in that it's not projected sort of all through a space, is it? I mean, it's more sort of grid-like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Because
I love that frame that you can move along and so yeah, can you tell us how you actually put it together?
yeah, so that was another layer of kind of technical exploration, I guess, in terms of the exhibition itself. I had two screens that you could move physically yourself, and one of them was moving through time, and the other one was moving through space. And the way that worked is there was a device that was connected to the screen on the track, and then as you move the screen on the track, that device was reading its position, and so as the position changed, it would either move the video through time. So you could actually you could scrub the video by moving the screen back and forth. Or the other one, there was, if you can imagine, like a series of five images or five videos in a virtual canvas. Then as you move the screen, you're like moving through a window through the space, and then it would reveal and show you other parts of the video.
Mm. Is that a unique process? Is that something that you came up with that's really quite original?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I've seen this sort of technology be used on stage shows a little bit. And I had used it a little bit in Germany, not in the context of art or in this kind of particular interactive context, but I really felt like that would add to the dimensionality of kind of what I was trying to achieve. And that's really
Mm,
the hybrid of my technical, my creative skill set. This kind of role has been defined by as creative technologist, and that's kind of partly what I define myself as now, as someone who's using those that technology in a creative way,
mm.
and that's mashing my two passions together. I guess the artistic passion and also the technical passion of like how do we achieve these things, what physical things can we build to kind of make this interesting, and yeah.
Yeah, which is like just the perfect scenario, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
It's amazing. I mean, you've created, it's almost like you created your own niche to sort of do the things that you're most passionate about and combine them in some way.
yeah. In some ways, I feel like I'm a few years behind. Because you get inspired by people all around the world doing really innovative stuff. But at the same time, then we have people come through our exhibition that are like, "Oh my God, I've never seen anything like that before,"
No, yeah.
and it makes you realize that, yeah, maybe I exist within like a pretty niche part of society or something.
No, but I think it's the beautiful thing about it is that you are you're presenting an art form that people are really connecting to. And
Mm,
it's probably very accessible, I'd say, to lots of people. You know, when I
yeah.
took my grandson to Oliver Eliasson in the Auckland Art Gallery, that little show, it was so interactive using light and shadow and reflection and
Mm,
all of those things. And he's 3 and he was just absolutely into it because
yeah.
it was so fascinating. And you know, when he did something, it responded. And so you're actually capturing, I'd say, a really a great audience, people who are very knowledgeable about art, but also people
Mm.
who aren't, which is a great thing, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the intersection of like science, art, and technology, right? Is what that kind of niche that I guess I've found myself in is it has really allowed me like 3 points of connection with people on each one of those pillars. Whereas in the kind of more the pure art pure art style, it's yeah, in some ways your audience is less because some people feel like they don't know how to connect with art.
Yeah.
Whereas with the data and with the level of interactivity and the kind of the science aspect to it, people feel like they can enter through those and be able to understand it more because they can understand how it functions or understand what's driving it and that sort of thing. So definitely during Rivers of Wind, I found that I had probably a wider audience than most artists would because of that.
Mm.
Which was I guess not surprising in hindsight, but at the time I was like, oh, that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I think it's it's a lovely gift you're giving people. How do you actually communicate the ideas behind the work with people? Are you happy for them just to come in and enjoy, or do you like them to know about the data and where it's all come from?
Yeah, no, absolutely. During Rivers of Wind, there's along the one of the screens we had the data was there all the time ticking over, so people could kind of see what was happening. And generally, I have a write up somewhere in the space that kind of talks about what it is and what's kind of driving it, and then yeah, always open to people to talk with people and kind of discuss it more
Mm,
and if they want to go further into the detail. We found that actually early at when we did Rivers of Wind at the Grid that I had done one write up and that just wasn't enough for people. So I ended up doing 2 more pages of stuff, published it on the website and had it in the space, and that alleviated some of the conversations because there was
mm,
people just like wanting to know more and more and more and more about the data and how it works and all that kind of thing, which was
yeah,
really
but
cool.
it's so cool. That's just incredible. And are you thinking about NFTs at all?
I did for a period of time think about kind of going down that road, but I realized actually during my Sight Unseen exhibition at Te Awaha that art sales isn't really where my kind of audience lies? My audience lies in the experience that we're creating. And I I sold a few prints and that, but I realized that I was more into crafting this live experience that you could share with your friends, with your family, than I was to creating something that could be sold.
Yeah. And so all your income generation is through the funding, basically, and potentially ticket sales.
Ticket sales, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we haven't had funding for any of my exhibitions. I've funded it all through my business, or businesses doing, you know, like these sorts of experiences for corporate or for stage shows or concerts or, all those sorts of things. Um, my other business kind of creating content for that is what's helped kind of fuel all of the
Mm,
other art stuff.
yeah.
It's classic pathway, right? It's like do the corporate jobs to get the money to fuel the art projects.
Yes. I mean, at least you've got that option, I guess. And that's a
Yeah,
positive thing. And you can kind
yeah,
of keep
totally.
dipping in and out of both, I suppose.
Yeah,
But,
and
I'm
both feed
sure.
each other.
Sorry.
Yeah, and both feed each other in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
they would do. But I think there is so much potential for funding too, although it's always a laborious task. You have to hire
it
somebody to
is.
do that if you can.
Yeah, it is. I've had a few, I've done quite a few funding proposals, had a few successful and had a few not successful. But yeah, it is a lot of work for potentially nothing. And that's, I guess, what can be quite challenging to deal with. So I tend to put my time more into the thing that is kind of in front of me and is coming in. So like producing content for jobs and stuff, and then using that as my funding to then
Mm.
fuel my art projects. Yeah,
Yeah, which was great. Yeah. And can you see yourself? I mean, you've been to New York already and been involved in other international projects. Can you see yourself with your own art practice taking your work internationally?
I would. Yes, I hope so.
Yeah.
It's absolutely my dream. I mean, there's quite a few of these kind of spaces like that we set up for the grid. Um, even in Australia, and but also like in most kind of major cities around the world now, there's kind of one of these spaces. So I would love to be able to tour Rivers of Wind to these different spaces.
Mm.
That is definitely something that we're kind of trying to make happen. In
Yeah.
the immediate future, though, like we're likely going to be taking Rivers of Wind down to Nelson, um, and doing an exhibition there, and potentially early next year bring it up to Auckland as well. So there's still lots of spaces in New Zealand that we can explore before we need to
Yeah.
go
There's
international.
still lots of
Yeah.
potential, which is a great position to be in. And can you see yourself ever doing something like the work that you were involved with in the museum? Could you see yourself, even with Rivers of Wind, being able to do an installation that was really on that massive scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if Rivers of Wind is more of a interior kind of project. Um, I think it'll just depend on what kind of my next art project becomes. Really, I have a few that I'm kind of working on, just ideas that have kind of started to permeate, but nothing too concrete yet. I really always try to design the spatial layout, the spatial exhibition to really complement the work as much as possible. So ultimately, I guess, yeah, if I come up with something that I feel like it needs to be outside on a building or at scale, then that's absolutely what I'll aim for. Um, but yeah, it just depends on kind of comes back to the concept of the content
Yeah.
and what is it about, what is it talking about, and yeah, is that appropriate for it or not?
Yeah. Where does it need to be? Is most of your work, do you think, data based? Like, is that always your starting point, do you think, for your own art practice?
Yeah, that was kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier, was when I was trying to find the narrative and the kind of the substance behind my artworks. I really found that in data, and so yeah, data will be my core narrative, at least for the foreseeable future, for sure.
Mm, yeah. And I guess it is telling your stories in some way, isn't it?
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about it is there's so much out there, but it's also it can be highly personalized. Like a lot of the people who came through Rivers of Wind, they were watching the dates tick over and they'll go, oh, that was the date that we got married, or that was the date my son was born, or, all of those things. So there was a lot of connection through that data, especially when data involves time. So I really felt that, and I really felt that I wanted to continue along those lines as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Okay, well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we get on to the questions?
No, far away.
You're happy?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And thank you very much for guiding me through this very complex art practice of yours, which
No
is
problem.
all very new to me, but it's so fascinating. It's just, yeah, it's very interesting. So, question, what would you say to somebody beginning their own creative journey?
Experiment. Don't feel like you have to do anything because someone else that you've seen someone else doing it, or that's what other people are doing. Just experiment with what you want to experiment with, and don't lock yourself into anything too early. Just keep going. It took me probably 8 years of making video and content before I realized that I was even going to do my own arts practice. So yeah, just keep experimenting, never stop learning.
And what would you say is the most challenging aspect of being an artist?
Giving yourself the time to work on things for yourself. I feel like a lot of external factors often get in the way, especially for me as a small business owner. We kind of discussed that before, but it's very all consuming, and it's probably one of my biggest challenges is just carving out the time that I need and want to be able to work on my own stuff. Yeah.
Are there any artists in this field or any other artists in particular who inspire your work?
Yeah, Joseph Michael, who I was talking about earlier, definitely has been a big inspiration for me, and getting along to work alongside him and see his process and be a part of that process, and yeah, just he was very inspiring for me.
Mm. And I'm not sure if I really actually want to keep asking this question. Why do you make the kind of work you make? Because I think we actually always cover it in
Yeah,
our conversation in some ways. But perhaps you could have a go at it. Why are you making this kind of work? Why are you using this medium? How does this medium talk to you?
yeah. I think it's really comes from that my background in the technical aspect, and then growing into the creative that I did. The medium that I'm using, the immersive projection format, really is such a beautiful hybrid of the two. And whenever I'm in these sorts of spaces, I just find it so inspiring, and it offers so much. It's a blank canvas, but like not in a scary way.
Mm,
It just offers so much that I feel like I sit in those spaces, and it inspires me to create really by being in there. So
yeah. Yeah. Oh well, it's I'm just so thrilled for you that you call yourself an artist, and then you've come to that point through the work that you've been doing. Was it something that you ever actually expected early on?
it really wasn't, like, especially being a technician and doing audio visual for corporate events and things early on. Like I never really considered myself to be an artist, even in the early days of like VJing, doing visuals for bands and DJs, and I wouldn't have ever considered myself an artist then. I was even nervous about it all the way through until I'd done like my first exhibition, and then even beyond that, there was something about the term. I used designer for a long time because I felt like it encompassed a lot of what I did. Um, but eventually, I think I just felt really comfortable with using that word,
Mm,
and I had people, and talk to people about it and that sort of thing, and what does it mean? Well, it can mean a lot of things, and it's not a scary word.
no. And you're
Yeah,
making art, so it makes sense.
it's you, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that it just sort of goes to show how influential an experience like working with that artist you worked with and having someone who is kind of opening your eyes up to another way of working or thinking, and
Mm,
to sort of be able to kind of hold your hand through it to a certain degree
mm.
is such an important part of someone's career.
Yeah, and just showing you that it's possible to do that, to be a digital artist in New Zealand in this kind of landscape, and to that could be your full time job, and you can, if you can dream it, you can make it happen. You can pull the right people together to make it happen. Like, then like go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Delaney. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and you're so interesting, and your practice is just phenomenal. And I can see you going huge places in the future. So well done, and thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, really, really appreciate your kind words. Thank you.